and we can get going. So thank you all for coming. More folks will probably trickle in, but thank you all for your interest in being an election worker. We have a whole panel of election workers here to tell you all about what they do, and we hope that you will leave this training tonight knowing what kind of role you might want to do on election day, and how to sign up to volunteer to be an election worker. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll start us off. All right, we're going to start off with our land acknowledgement. So the host organizations tonight are Open Democracy, the Forward Foundation, and the New Hampshire Coalition for Voting Rights. And we all acknowledge that we do our work on Indakina, the unceded homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We honor the land and the waterways and the Anunnaki who have stewarded Indakina throughout the generations and continue to do so today. And giving thanks to Indigenous New Hampshire Collaborative Collective for this map of Indakina. So 3 organizations. I'm from Open Democracy. I'm the program coordinator. And Open Democracy's mission is an equal voice for all, achieved by reducing the influence of money in politics, protecting the freedom to vote, and ensuring fair redistricting. Tim, do you want to tell us about the Forward Foundation?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, everyone, and for your interest in getting involved as a poll worker or election worker. My name is Tim Pelletier. I'm the Leadership Development Director with the Forward Foundation. We're a nonprofit C3 organization that was founded in New Hampshire to help fill a representation gap for working age people and help young Granite Staters participate more fully in our democracy. We provide research, training, mentorship, and a ton of different opportunities for folks to get more plugged in and involved in their communities. And one of the most important ways for us, for folks to be able to do that, is by volunteering as a poll worker and serving on election day. So as I said, very thrilled for all of you to be here tonight.
Thanks, Tim. And Kelsey, you want to tell us about the New Hampshire Campaign for Voting Rights?
Hi, yes, I'm Kelsey DeVille. I work with the New Hampshire Campaign for Voting Rights, and we are a coalition of state and national organizations, watchdog organizations, attorneys, and advocacy groups working to ensure and preserve the right to vote for all Granite Staters.
Thanks, Kelsey. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who's going to tell you about some of the benefits of volunteering and who is eligible to be a poll worker.
Hi, folks. So thank you so much, Sarah. So this is a really important moment for our democracy. Elections are just right around the corner. And while we always say, every election is very important, this one especially is so. Across the country, election administrators have been reporting that there's been shortages of election workers in their community. That may not be the case everywhere in the communities in New Hampshire, but it is certainly a national trend that we have seen and experts have seen on this. There's a great Brennan study report that we'll have linked that we can share with you. But that means that when there are shortages of election workers, there could be longer lines at the polls, and even in some instances, poll placing closures, which can threaten access to the ballot for vulnerable communities. And studies independently have found that voters are more confident in their elections when they don't have to wait too long in line and when they encounter competent staff at the polls. We have really small, great, tight-knit communities in New Hampshire, whether you live in your ward in the city or in your local towns. And one thing that we all probably experience going to the polls to vote is seeing the friendly faces of community members there. And that helps increase trust in our elections and makes people feel more confident there. Election workers overall are critical to maintaining safe in-person voting for communities and making sure that everyone has the opportunity to vote and feel confident in the vote that they're making. So it is really important right now, especially at this moment where we have seen a lot of shortages nationwide and a good need for folks to get more involved. Next slide. So there's a ton of benefits for volunteering. I think first and foremost, it's great because you get to help your neighbors participate in our democracy. Safe, accessible, and secure elections are the bedrock of democracy, and the people who ensure that that's happening are the folks who are doing the hard work every day, every election, of helping administer and keep the polling place running smoothly. Poll workers, we'll learn more about the different roles that elections workers have throughout the night. But they're really making sure that things are going well at the polling place. They also can help elevate any possible problems or inappropriate contact to authorities. So they really are important in making sure that things are going well. And in many communities in New Hampshire, poll workers can also receive some amount of compensation, which is exciting, and it can help you throughout that, get through the day, since it can very much be a long day working at the polls, but it is a very rewarding and a very important one for, by that matter. So there are a ton of benefits, but really, I think the big driver here is that you get to help your neighbors vote and participate in our democracy. And then just next slide. So in New Hampshire, poll workers can meet a variety of requirements in order to be able to volunteer. You have to be registered to vote in New Hampshire. You have to be at least 18 years of age. You have to be a resident of the voting district that you're volunteering in or working in. There's some exceptions to this rule. If actually, Kiri will have that as part of your story later when you talk about serving as a supervisor. But so there are some exceptions there, but for the most part, you have to be a resident of that district. And students who are 17 years of age may be appointed at the central polling place in state elections or can help out as a greeter. It can really vary. And some roles may require party affiliation. That's something that we'll cover when we talk about kind of gaps in some communities later, where we need folks to step up and volunteer. One thing I do want to highlight is that it can vary, and the nature of these roles can vary by community in New Hampshire. So please don't take anything, like certainly these things are certain, of course, what these requirements should be for you to be able to volunteer and work at the polls. But there are some things that may vary by your town. So you'll be able to learn more once we help connect you to your clerk or who helps administer your elections in your community. So you can find out the roles or the ways that you can help out in the best ways. So it can vary, but for the most part, these are the requirements in order to be able to serve as a poll worker. And once more, to really underscore, they're super important roles. They are the bedrock of our elections, and they keep everything running smoothly at the polling place. So you volunteering is going to be able to help that and make sure that your neighbors get to vote and feel comfortable and confident and proud of their democracy. So that's just a brief overview of what you can expect and why you should volunteer. We really need you to.
All right, now we're going to dive into our panelists. So as a brief overview, there are different roles on and before election day for our elections. Some are volunteer, some are elected. Greeters, ballot clerks, parking attendants, folks who come after the election to count ballots. Those are some examples of some volunteer roles, and a select person, selectman, moderator, supervisors of a checklist, and a clerk, though not all clerks, are examples of elected roles. So to start us off, two very important examples of volunteer roles are greeters and ballot counters. So the beginning of, or the first thing the voters see when they come to the polling place are greeters who greet the voter, help them get into the correct line if they need to register to vote that day, or if they're headed to a table to vote. They help reduce the likelihood of long lines forming or delays for voters. And these folks could also be assigned other duties as needed that day. And then at the other end of the election, when the polls close, some places bring in ballot counters to count the ballots if they have hand counting as opposed to a ballot counter machine. And then one more example of a volunteer role would be a ballot clerk. These are also called ballot inspectors in some places. So these are the folks who, once you've seen the greeter, you're a voter and you're going to the table, and these are the folks sitting at the table who will say, what's your name and address? They'll have a big book that is the checklist. They'll look through the checklist, find your name, and then mark you in this column. They'll hand you a ballot and mark off that they've given you a ballot. In red, the ballot clerks can also make some adaptations. So if your address has changed, but you're still voting in that voting place, they'll change your address. If you come with an ID that is an out-of-state ID, like in this example, maybe the person showed a Massachusetts license, we'll mark MA, that you showed an out-of-state photo ID. Or this is an example of a checklist during the primary. The checklist, the ballot clerks will mark off if you were an undeclared voter, if you took a Democrat or a Republican ballot. And then from there, I'll hand it off to Kiri, who will tell us all about being a supervisor of the checklist.
Thanks, you guys. It's very nice to be here and talk to you guys. Is my sound okay? I wasn't sure if it was too low or too high. I guess it's okay. So the supervisor of the checklist, which is kind of an odd name, basically we register voters, and that goes on year round. In some locations, like where I work in Concord, and in cities, the city clerk does a lot of the registration of voters if you come into the clerk's office between elections. And as a city supervisor, we do most of our work on election days. But in towns, the town supervisors meet regularly and take registrations and keep up with the checklist. Let's see, I'm just taking a look at this. Yeah, so just imagine we take care of the checklist when there's any issues, or if we need to, add anybody to them. We make sure that that's done by the ballot clerks. So, but what's more interesting than that, I think, is that the way I started out, the way I became a supervisor was incredibly lucky because after the 2016 election, I was just getting involved in voting rights and electoral politics. And so the assistant city clerk in Manchester was looking for what they call registrars, deputy registrars. So this is like someone to volunteer to help the supervisor of the checklist in particular wards. And so she was able to take people that didn't live in Manchester. So I did that. I volunteered to do that, and I really liked it. And I think it was the next year, I just happened to get a call from a friend who was the supervisor of the checklist in my ward in Concord. And she said somebody had needed to leave their post. There's 6-year terms that we run for, and that's a long time. And somebody had to leave their post before their 6 years was up. So asked if I wanted to come in and make up, I think it was a year or two. So I said, yeah. So while it's an elected position, I got to volunteer for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, which was fantastic. And then when that end of that term happened, I ran in the election. So volunteering is awesome because you can get in, and when there's an opening of something that you would really like to do, you're there and you can get in on it. I think, is there anything else? Tim?
I think you've covered it wonderfully. Love the pitch for not only volunteering, but how that can lead you to be an elected official yourself and step up. And I know Olivia will have a pitch for that later.
Great. Well, I'll answer questions later if you guys have them.
Thanks, Kiri. And I'll hand it off to moderator Lyle, who is the moderator in Keene.
Okay, I presume everybody can hear me. I've been doing this job. I had said for 4 years. It's actually 6 years. I've been trying to get rid of a couple of years there on the other end of it. But basically, what a moderator does is manage the process, the whole election process. And I spent a lot of years in the newspaper advertising business managing salespeople, which is very much like herding cats. And so that was part of the reason I think that they thought I'd be a good choice for this. But you not only have to learn all of the things that relate to how the polls work and how the election works and what new rules the Secretary of State has been put into place, but you have to do all the lead up work before Election Day. Election Day is a long process. Mine starts at 6 a.m. in the morning and very often doesn't get over until about 11 o'clock that night. By the time we get everything bolted up at City Hall and done. But it starts a long time before then, because this year, for example, in advance of the primary elections, there were 2 state meetings, 3 Zoom meetings put on by the state, 2 city meetings, the counting of the ballots, the blank ballots, to make sure that they've given you the correct number that you're going to be responsible for, and going out and actually setting up the polling place. I'm lucky. My polling place is actually a community meeting room, the Mike Blastos room, so I can get access to it early, and I get some of my poll workers to assist me, and we then figure out, based on what we've done in previous years, how to set up the place so that it's going to work efficiently. I think the key item in all of this is we want to make it as easy to vote as we can. Obviously, people have to present identification and proof of residence and so forth in order to vote, but we try to make it as easy and as simple and as understandable as we can. And at the same time, I also have a big responsibility, not just to the voters, but to my poll workers. We have to make it as easy for them as we can as well. That means scheduling things like lunch breaks, and in my case, working up a schedule in a day that agrees with everybody. Some of our poll workers are, how do I say, quite experienced. And so they've been doing it for a lot of years, and they may not move as well as they did in the beginning of their career in poll working, but we try to figure out a way to accommodate everybody, both voters and poll workers. So I think you were saying earlier, or Tim was saying earlier, that some poll workers get paid. I can safely tell you that by the time I buy coffee and donuts for all of my poll workers and split the cost of lunch with the checklist of supervisor, and attend all the meetings that I have to attend, that I'm probably making about 76 cents an hour. So it's not a job that you get into because you're going to make any money on the deal. So as I said, we do have to recruit, we do have to schedule. That means an awful lot of emails as we get people to work afternoons and people work evenings, people to come in at the end of the day and help count ballots and so forth. We do have to prepare materials, because I'm in a city. A lot of the material preparation is actually done by the city clerk's office. So that's a big plus for us. But there's so much stuff that has to be hauled to the polls. We have to haul the ballot machine. We have to haul the voting machine that works primarily off of hearing situations. We have to haul the ballots. We have to haul all the boxes with all the materials. So I just this last year went out and bought a pickup truck because it was easier than trying to get it all into my Jeep. So it's one of those situations. There's a lot of material, a lot of work to setting it up. We do answer questions from voters, and I'm sure Sarah, when she was working for us, saw several occasions where I had to deal with voters who, in some cases, didn't have questions, but really wanted to make political statements. And we have to make sure that that doesn't get in the way of other voters, but at the same time, we have to receive those voters with a certain degree of dignity so that we're acknowledging what they're saying. So that's another piece of this whole process. And again, being a moderator is very much like being the ringmaster of a 3-ring circus. I have to monitor the machine. The latest ruling from the Secretary of State's office requires that moderators be on top of the voting machines all the time, so that they can read whenever a vote gets kicked back by the machine, and make sure that the person who is placing that vote has the opportunity to put it into the alternative hand count side of the machine, and make sure that they understand the process and appreciate it as well, so they can feel comfortable with it. So that's another process that's added a lot to the course of the day. We have to process the absentee ballots on election day. I'm lucky, as I was saying to Sarah, my previous, the moderator who previously did the job for 13 years is now one of our select people, and she's a great help with doing absentee ballots, a big plus there. But it really comes down to, and at the end of the day, we have to fold up everything, make sure it's counted, make sure it's properly boxed as per the rules of the as per the rules of the Secretary of State's office. And then we have to make sure that all the counts are turned in. And now that includes over ballots and under ballots and all kinds of things of that nature. And then we have to take it to the city clerk's office and make sure that she's happy with the, I think it's something on 8 different ballot reports that we have to turn in at this point, and make sure that she's happy with all the math, make sure the math comes out. Again, we were very lucky this year. We had a woman who was an accountant, is a CPA, and she was heading up the process in terms of counting the ballots. And so ours were, it came out relatively smoothly. So, and again, it's just a case of balancing all the different things that have to be done and sort of managing the flow.
That sounds great. Thanks, Bob. So yeah, you've heard from so far different scales. We had maybe just one ward, and now we're going up to moderator in a large city where there's maybe more complexity and more to look over, but the experiences of different moderators in different places and different supervisors of the checklist as well will differ based on each individual polling place. So thank you, Bob.
My pleasure.
And Olivia, do you want to tell us about being a select person?
Thank you, Sarah. So as a city councilor, I also have double duty as a selectman on election day. Some cities elect selectmen in their city, and other small towns, the selectmen of the town are your select people on election day. We have multiple roles before the election, on election day, and then after the election. The selectmen are responsible for choosing polling locations, setting polling hours, making sure the buildings are equipped for an election. We also set the budget for the election and what each of the staff get paid. So we get lobbied often on election day to raise salaries, at least in my city. On election day, New Hampshire Constitution, Article 2, Part 32 requires 2 selectmen to be present at the polls all day long. And we are kind of one of these roles that when everyone goes to lunch, I kind of feel like I do every job on election day because I cover for lots of lunch breaks. So I kind of am cross-trained in a lot of different roles, but process absentee ballots, get sent out to the parking lot if there's parking problems, help disabled voters. We have a lift that gets up the couple of stairs. So I'm out in the hallway helping somebody get up the stairs if need be. And, you know, kind of one of those duties that require us to do things at the end of the night. We have to count ballots, and it's the selectman's signature that ends up on the boxes with the moderator when the seals are done at the end of the night. And we get these fun books. All of us as election workers get books each year, and they just keep growing with more rules and responsibility for each of our folks. So select person roles really change from town to town based on your, we have a great building and grounds crew that set up polling places for us. So I don't have to lug all of this stuff. And my polling place is the Opera House, which is right connected to City Hall. So we're right next to it. So we have very minimal lugging of stuff that other communities might be responsible for.
All right, and last but absolutely not least, do we have Joan here to tell us about the experience being a clerk?
Hey, Sarah, I can jump in. So
Okay.
Joan just let me know that she's not able to join because per a bullet point on this slide, she is trying to get out absentee ballots. So Joan Dargy, Milford Town Clerk, was going to join us. She is not able to. So I'll jump in here and just say the duties of the clerk before, on, and after election day are numerous. Here are a few of them. So as needed by moderators, they can recruit and train poll workers. They pass new voter registrations and party changes to the supervisors of the checklist. They send out absentee ballot request forms, absentee ballots, and post sample ballots. They accept election supplies from the Secretary of State and accept, process candidate filing forms, and so much more.
Thanks, Kelsey. So you've heard from a variety of different positions, and each is a very important piece to our democracy puzzle that keeps our elections and our democracy running smooth. And with that, I'll pass it back to Kelsey, who will tell us how, if you're intrigued by any of these positions, do you sign up to become a poll worker or volunteer?
Thanks, Sarah. Do you want me to cover this slide or?
I can do this. Well, yeah, talk about both.
Great. Okay. So, where poll workers are needed. So, if you are not in any of the towns listed on this slide, you should absolutely still sign up and also reach out to your clerk. This is not an exhaustive list, but just rather places where we know we need folks. So Dover, Derry, Concord, Keene, Hanover, Franklin, Ward 2, Laconia, Ward 1, Ward 4, Ward 5, and Ward 6. And certainly, as mentioned, contact your town or city clerk, even if your town isn't on this list. And Sarah, could you go to the next slide? Great. And so how to become a poll worker. If I'm sure that many of you came to this training by way of this form, but if you haven't already, I'm putting our form in the chat. You can sign up there. We will send your contact information to clerks and moderators. It's worth noting that you may not hear back. Some towns and wards, in fact, many have already reached their volunteer capacity for the November 8th election, but they are taking names, even those towns, for backups and, if folks drop out on election day. So still sign up. And if you don't hear from your clerk, we are, after we send your information to them, we'll work to follow up with all of those folks. But if you don't hear from them, you don't hear from us, we certainly encourage you to follow up. And I'll kick it to Olivia, I believe, for the second part of the slide.
And I will say that many clerks and moderators keep a wait list of people. You never know who's going to get sick the day before the election or the week before the election. So I know Linda's on the call. She said, add me to the wait list because, and then she got a call the Friday before the election that they needed her. So it is important to make sure the clerks have available people for these positions. And I do want to say that some of these positions are elected that we talked about tonight: clerk, moderators, supervisors of the checklist. And in towns where you have town meetings, you can file for these jobs January 25th through February 3rd. So if you belong to a town that has a town meeting in early January, you will file to run for these positions. For those of you who live in cities, you will file during the regular candidate filing period for your city elections. So clerks and moderators are a 2-year position. Supervisors of the checklist are a 6-year position. Me as a selectman is a 3-year position, but I think that varies per town or city that you're in. So just remember that there might be openings and to file in early January when the snow is flying.
And if you have any questions about the process of filing or what it's like to run for those, the Ford Foundation's partner org 603 Ford can help facilitate that for you as well. So please reach out if you have any questions. But very important to serve in these volunteer roles, but also down the line, we're gonna need folks to step up to run for them too. So thank you for that shout out, Olivia.
All right, I'm going to take down the slides and see if we have any questions. We just threw a lot of info at you. Glenn Ring. That's your, yeah. Oh, there you go.
I'm just wondering, when you said you can only serve in these positions in your district, is that your congressional district? Is it your town, or is it your local within the town, or how does that go?
Yeah, that means your town, or if you live in a city, your ward. So some of these positions are ward or town specific. Some of these jobs like greeter or parking or do not have to be ward or town specific. As Carrie said, she was able to go to Manchester and help out. So some of these jobs you are not required. So it really depends on which role. But what we mean by you actually would volunteer at the place that you vote.
Okay, thank you.
Hi,
Here,
my name is Ellen. I
Hi,
have,
Ellen.
is that okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I came in a little bit late. I apologize, but I was wondering what the training for a poll worker was, where they were located, the trainings, or, what that involves.
That's a great question. I can speak to the city of Keene, but I believe some of the aspects of what Keene does might be different. We had trainings from the Secretary of State, trainings from the city, and then our city clerk put together a couple different YouTube videos that we could watch at our leisure, and then fill out a form that said we watched these videos and were trained. But if any other folks from other places want to hop in and talk about their trainings, if they're different.
I think it does vary, but what you laid out is the basic sort of setup of what you can do. There's usually something from the state, depending on what your job is. And then in the polling place, say if you're volunteering to be the ballot clerk, hopefully your moderator will help train you after you probably watched a video and figured out what to do. So then just to get oriented, that's a very detail oriented job.
Okay.
and there are some in-person trainings that the secretaries, the state offices offer, and there's also some on-demand videos that you can watch depending on your role. And often each community does a community-specific training about how it works for
Oh, good.
those roles.
Okay, so I'd have to go to the town hall to apply for the position, and then the training would come after that. Okay.
Correct. And sometimes if you're brand new to a role, somebody did an observation. They said, "Oh, I'd like to observe before I do this role." So they sort of were put in a observation role. So each community does it slightly different, but sometimes you get a 5-minute training before your shift. In some communities, you get really detailed trainings, but I think that varies.
Okay, thank you so much.
Kira, you have a hand up?
Yeah, there was something I wanted to say, and it's kind of another pitch, and it's not detailed question oriented. So I'm sorry, this is all out of order. But I did want to mention that I'm, without sounding political, election workers who care about voting rights and who feel good about people voting and making that possible, because not everyone feels that way. There are jobs that have a fair amount of discretion, and I would say that the supervisor of the checklist is one of those jobs. And to have people who really care about democracy and who care about voting rights in a job like that, I think is really important. And I wanted to pitch that to this group because I think it's a pretty safe bet that you guys feel that way.
Thanks, Kiri. That's, yeah, super important for sure. Can I get a hand or virtual hands for who's interested in supervisor of the checklist?
Come on, Sue, I know you're a supervisor.
Or who already is a supervisor of the checklist? How about a hand or virtual hand for ballot clerk, checking people in? Oh, got some hands there. Awesome, awesome. And Linda's already a ballot clerk. Nice. What about moderator? Any interest in moderator? Well, now you know what they do, so if you're interested further down the line, you will know. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, Linda.
Do all the moderators also run the town meetings? Is that always a part, yeah, of the job?
I'd be happy to try and take a shot at answering that one. In the city where we are, there are 5 moderators for the 5 wards. We do not run the meetings. However, in the small town that I used to live in, the moderator also has the responsibility of running the town meeting. So it all depends on how big the unit is. In cities, they're too big for the moderators to do that, but towns, the moderators very often run the meetings.
Thank you.
And I would say the moderator in small towns runs the town meeting, and there's often somebody elected to a school district moderator. And in some places, those moderators can be the same individual, or in some towns have a town moderator who's separate from the school district moderator who handles the school budget. And that sort of varies a little bit town by town in New Hampshire.
Oh, and I have to add one quick thing, and just an example of Rollinsford, that we have a separate election for the water and sewer district. So, so it's an added attraction.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah.
All right. I have one last question for you all. You are interested in being a poll worker. Remind me how you would go about signing up. You can come off mute, raise your hand, shout it all at the same time. The link that was shared. Yes, Matt. The link that was shared. So there's a link in the chat, and or you could call your clerk and moderator to volunteer. But the link that's in the chat, the PowerPoint and the recording, I will send out after probably tomorrow morning at some point. So you'll have all the resources and the information about how to sign up. And if there are no more questions, thank you all for coming. It was great to see how much interest there is in strengthening and continuing our democracy. Thank you all for your interest in being poll workers. Have a
Thank
great
you for this information.
Thank you to our panelists as well. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Kiri.